no idea where you seated yourself?
Oh, you're back.
Just everywhere.
Okay.
And
Yeah, I had to like go to the building across because there was no water in this one. No,
Not stand right here.
But I mean, I assume you just use the windows. Like to pee. Just open a window.
I wish life was rolled like that.
Oh, the random things I say are risky. What? Even the water holder, whatnot, spins. I can't.
I know these chairs are so spinny, and you'd think it would make them easier to move. I mean, it says it's still going. It's just.
It says no data there.
Yeah. What software is it? Is it like?
It's like a
No, that's fine then. I'll Google it and figure it out.
but it's called OBS.
Oh, that's what I needed. Oh yeah, OBS. I know. Okay, that was the piece of information I needed. Thanks. Are you cool to do the infographics for the Friday workshop?
When is that again?
So have you wait,
Somewhere in
have you
April?
already spotted?
On a Thursday?
Have you already
On a
spotted
Thursday
an
the fifth.
internship platform?
No, it's not next week. It's definitely after.
After next week, like the mountain.
So then I decided to
There's a bunch of talking points. We're going to put them in the file on the drive, so you can literally just use those talking points to make the infographic. Yeah, no, it makes it so much easier. And you're going to have to do that in Publishing 210 anyway, which you take for the second year first semester. It's literally like your final project is to make an infographic.
I thought you graduated.
Well, one of them. There's other options, but I chose the infographic. The others were so much more complicated. I was like, so I can make an infographic about domestic workers' rights, or I can like rewrite a whole game script. What are you? What's the
Yeah, bringing a scientific calculus to the English exam.
Oh, I remember that essay. I wrote minutes just to be a bitch about it.
Shakespeare like
But I'm going to nail every single one of these up as I'm given.
Oh, okay, yeah. Because I need to be on the side. Okay, I'm not the one that's going to idea.
You
Yeah.
have a, you know where I can get like
Do you, or like a descriptive image, like a.
no, something I can put in case.
Oh, I have that. That I did make one of those. How do you want? Can I email it to you? What? How would you like to receive it?
Don't want to open I'm joking.
Wait, give me 1 second. Gmail. Okay, SI.
Yes, that's what I'm looking for. I'm like, how do you
SIBO
at Gmail.
Also, just send me the link
the link to the.
Yeah, I just want to go outside and check
Yeah.
the sound.
This is, I mean, I've got this on rather than speaking has to be on as well. This is on. Okay, I'm speaking now? Okay, that's working. Speaking.
Speak.
Listen, sometimes you've got to come up with a line to say and you can only remember the first line of Harry Potter.
Have you sent it to me?
Have I?
Sent it.
I haven't yet. I'm trying to get this link, but I'm fighting with my cell phone. Because it is apparently 1943. Right, attach this or inserted it, whatever. Okay, I've sent it. It should be there.
Is it a 9?
A 9? No.
Okay, so it's... Sorry.
No, it's fine.
So after the last hour,
That's good to hear.
so after the I,
Okay, now you've got a profile picture. You always know when Gmail's working when someone's got a profile picture.
so I'm streaming to the server and then this laptop.
Yeah.
I stay for that stuff.
Yeah, I'll sit here just for, yeah, that is the plan, yes.
No, perfect. Then let's just hope the internet doesn't kick me out.
In which case, we will just suffer.
Oh yeah,
I love the shadow.
Thank you. I stole it from my
Oh, from your ex. Nice. We support it.
How's it going? Are y'all ready?
The stream is working. Touch wood. There's no wood here. Touch wood.
It's fine with touching wood in our brain. Yeah. But all set up, all good to go.
Yeah.
Great.
I should go give this microphone to someone who can actually use it. Oh, that's very weird. Do not enjoy that. Okay, and I should share that link with the people. Yeah, looks like it there, and
I'm gonna go fetch. Have you sent the link already? Have you started the?
Yeah.
Have you started the sheet? So
Yeah.
Someone logged in, but it's good. Do me a favor.
Yeah.
Can you mind asking someone, whoever is the person to ask it, the picture of the street. Because I can't see how to communicate that. So the picture of the street.
Oh, I know.
is not
I did
100.
see like what level it was. Like, you mean how far it was? I
So
mean,
that's, oh, you can't see now. What do
no.
you
I mean, right now it's that talk thing.
Is this? I'm gonna
But
look
like, I
at
mean, it looks roughly like that. So that's.
Is that fine?
I'm sure that's fine. I'm the only person who makes any decisions about this kind of thing, so I say it's fine.
And you don't need to see the board behind. So it's like
I don't think the slides are like. I haven't specifically seen the slides, but I don't think the slides are that important.
Can you please send me the link to the street?
Yes, I can do that.
Oh, you have on your phone. So you can just
Yeah, no, sure. That would make it life easier for everybody. Yes. Yeah. calling you by the wrong names and the wrong pronouns. Imagine the discomfort and anxiety you'll be feeling at the idea that you are not able to use the correct bathrooms. This, my friends, is an harrowing experience for many students still in South Africa. Calls for unisex bathrooms, gender-neutral uniforms, and protection of transgender and gender-diverse students have arguably fallen on deaf ears. Hence today's topic, transgender and gender rights in schools and universities in South Africa. This topic is also spurred on by the enactment of the UP&Out protocol, which will be a special focus of today's discussion. So, before I give the floor to our speakers, I would just like to tell you how the format of this is going to work. So firstly, two speakers, Sia Klomba and Naledi Panza, sorry, will be giving us a short presentation and their insights on the topic based on their knowledge. And afterwards, we're going to open the round table for you guys to give us comments and maybe even suggestions, questions, etc. All right. So I'd like to introduce our first speaker, Sia Klomba. Sia is sorry. I will just quickly give you a brief bio and then Sia can come. Sia is a human rights activist and alumni of FITS. She serves as director of Be True to Me, a national online support organization for transgender and gender diverse persons. She is furthermore founder and chairperson of TransWorks Global. She advocates against gender violence and femicide with a passion for facilitation of critical social issues and training of staff and students on diversity and inclusion. And she's here from Ghana. So please, Sia.
Okay, I do want me to stand up. Is this on? Okay, I'm not going to stand. Okay, but thank you for that. Thank you for the introduction. Number one, I think this platform is amazing. And for you to be even interested in having this conversation is revolutionary. I don't think that enough students are taking up space and actually, saying, I'm uncomfortable with A, B, and C, and I want to do something about it. I want to see change. So for you to be, coming together like this is beautiful. And I'm looking forward to an amazing back and forth conversation about what's going on here. I want you to be comfortable. I want you to bring forth exactly, what you would say if we weren't here in this space. Tell us, what are the problems? What are you facing? What are the challenges? And we'll see very quickly we can advise you going further. Yeah. Oh yeah, pronouns she and her. And yeah, just do the things.
Oh, this is Genevieve also from Ghana.
Hi, my name is Genevieve. My favorite cartoon is Steven Universe, and I love Miyazaki movies, and I'm also the programs coordinator for the Gala Queer Archive, which is based in Johannesburg. Gala's been around since 1997, and as an archive, basically archives and addresses the historical omission and erasure of LGBTIQ's histories, stories, and experiences by honoring those stories, by archiving those stories, but also serving as a center for education. So what I do is I run programs around gender and sexual diversity, mostly with students and staff at universities, but also in community spaces. And it's an absolute pleasure to be here today. Thanks.
Let me also quickly introduce Naledi with her bio. So, I have to give you the correct phrase. Naledi is a junior researcher and counselor and facilitator at the CSAMG and Just Leaders. She has a BA Honours in Sociology from Rhodes and a Master's degree from UP. Yes! This is where her interests in climate change, social justice, human rights, health policy, and youth was nurtured. Turning the page. Naledi has written a number of academic studies on these topics and is currently working on a project dealing with understanding the needs of transgender and gender diverse students in residences. So she will also be giving us a perspective on that. And yes, I will let you introduce yourself further in the lady.
Thank you so much. We appreciate being here today, and it's so lovely to hear the work you do, Genevieve and Sia, because it's really incredible to find a community of people other than the center that we can work with and share these experiences with. And thank you so much for having us, Team Karina, Samson, and everyone. So yeah, like I've already been introduced. My name is Naledi. I identify as a learner in this space, right? So there's interest and also acknowledging that there's a lot of learning that needs to be done. So as much as we do training, and I am passionate about social justice and human rights and trans rights, I do have a reflective self that says I'm learning, right? So as much as I'm busy collecting all the data, and let me change my PhD maybe, I'm not going to your archives. But yeah, so yeah, definitely I'm a learner. I'm trying to get into the space, learn as much as I can, but also sort of keep the academic side of things, so that we're not only having these beautiful spaces to share, but also document this information so that in the future, when everyone is being shunned for not being accepting and inclusive, we'll be like, yeah, history ain't gonna judge you well. So yeah, I'm basically trying to change the system from within, and yeah.
All right, so we're going to start with Sia. Take the. I mean, a lot of the stuff that I actually wanted to say is like really basic. I mean, I'm not going to go through the whole presentation, but it's like, I think the key things are just, yeah. But were you familiar with the acronym and how it works? But I would say that the key thing is to set up the policies in such a way that you are intentional about sort of defining the LGBTQ and implanting that very much in your policies and the recommendations that you're making. And my major concern is that, there's a tendency to just say students, just be broad and say just the queer community, and not be intentional by spelling out the details, like of what happens in the bathrooms, what happens in change room facilities, and that allocation of that binary system that's like inherent in every institution that we end up in. And I would say that in your being intentional, it's like, the problem is that if students don't speak up, you don't say anything, the university will never realize that there must be a better put aside for these changes to be made, even if it's just something as cosmetic as printing out signage, And in the conversations that Genevieve and I have in these spaces, we always try to wake people up to the fact that in our diversity within the LGBTQ, it's not just about people who are lesbians, it's not just about the gays, it's about everyone. And 9 times out of 10 people are more comfortable with just the first 2, and everything else is kind of an optional extra. And yeah, we want to change that culture in this conversation today, and hopefully start seeing that even in your policy. Are we good? Yes. I see sign language.
Sorry. See, I please stand here so we can take beautiful pictures of you.
Oh, you want to take pictures of me? Oh, okay. No, I mean, I in my mind, I wanted to do a whole presentation, but I'm realizing now that we want to keep this more conversational. So I guess I will probably be sitting for the majority of this conversation. But yeah, the idea was to put up the opportunity for everyone to look at the fact that in our diversity within the LGBTQ, that there are certain identities, the intersex and the sort of gender non-conforming individuals, the transgender individuals, don't really get a chance to express themselves and explore as well their expression of gender within the university context for fear of being discriminated against. So what are the protocols that you imagine, being the way forward? Do you want people to get dismissals? Do you want to get people having to get warnings? Are people going to get fined in a particular way? Is there community service that are going to be attached to those punishments? Like, if you, as a student, sort of community and people that are instrumental in SRC or community think tanks around social justice issues, it's important for you to already have those things computed in the back of your head. And even in these proposals, like I had to browse as well through your proposal for the policy, and I'm already seeing beautiful things, and I'm excited about the way forward. I just can't wait to see those implemented. Yeah, let's do the thing.
Thank you so much, Sia. Is there any other slides you want to
No, I was going to do a full, but I'm realizing that, we're going to eat too much into your time, so let's just keep it.
Alright, so we'll share with you guys the slides as well, everybody that RSVP. Right. Sure.
So thank you so much. I might be a bit of an absconder. I'm going to throw my high school under the bus and say they should not have made me a prefect because I did not follow all the rules. So as much as, yeah, you've just given me more time, so I'm going to have my presentation for now. But I'll try to just rush through as much as we can because our hosts are going to be sharing the slides. So what I was hoping to talk about today and to create conversation around is the trans protocol that was mentioned at the beginning. You know, it's something that I am going to address at the very end because it is something that has just been launched by just this last year. So conversations like these and people reading the actual trans protocol is what's going to make it what it's meant to be, right? So what I wanted to share about is where I'm working, the space I'm in, so that you can understand where my research fits in as well as how the trans protocol came to be, you know, an interest of mine. Cool. So first slide, cool. The next one is how I'd like us to go through with this. So I'm part of the Just Leaders program. I'm a researcher under the Just Leaders program. It's a program hosted by the Center for Sexualities, AIDS and Gender. I see some familiar faces, so some people are part of the program that we're aware of. It's 9 weeks. We teach around inclusivity, HIV and AIDS, democracy, human rights, and social justice in its broadest form. It's only 9 weeks, but afterwards is where the magic begins. You can then join the research cohorts. You can then be part of community engagement where we work with high school learners. You can also join the advocacy and social media team. You can also be a befriender because at the center we do free HIV counseling and testing. And then you can also do, I'm forgetting one, and it's always one. I love its research, which I'm actually hitting up a bit. But anyway, so that's basically the program. Upstairs is where we are. Feel free to pop in anytime. Cool. So what I'm hoping that we'll have a discussion about, I'm just going to go through because I'm very conscious that some people are watching and are trying to educate themselves. So there's like a basic glossary, just while I'm speaking, have a look, check, and because we've got, you know, experts in the space, people who are living the experiences of what I have found and typed up there. So have a look, let us know if there's something we're getting wrong. So it's just basic terminology around, you know, gender queer and non-binary, what transgender is, you know, and what cisgender is, because we do have forms that are starting to be more open. We're speaking about policy, right? Asking people to identify as either cisgendered, you know, or transgendered, or something that's not on the form. And some people get confused because they don't even know what cisgender means, and they're like, I'm nothing. So we also understand that we used to be snacks, you know, back in high school and primary, you'd be like, what if I put Indian? Next thing, statistics project managers, they look for the Indian. The Indian is not there, it's tens. Right? So there's a lot of things that we consider when it comes to this, but basic terminology is really important. Cool, already told you about the Just Leaders program. And then yeah, what I hope that we get into a little bit about is gender justice. There's a whole range of research around this space, right? But I think what's very important to understand is that gender justice is speaking to basically a world where everybody, women, men, boys, girls, transgender, intersex people, and people who are non-binary, genderqueer, gender diverse, and all the beautiful words and experiences that are coming out because we're speaking out that, listen, I'm actually not being included in this university space. It's a world where everyone has access to opportunities. Sorry, it's slide number 5 now. Yes, you're amazing. No, perfect, I think. Yes, on point. And over there we've got the part 1. Yes, the other one was correct, so it's fine. I'm really sorry. So yeah, it's basically gender justice is trying to make sure that everyone has got access, everyone is valued equally, and we're able to share equitably in the distribution of power, knowledge, and resources. So that's basically the academic side of it. I'm going to move on to the next one. Oh, and before we had the Queerpedia, just show of hands, anyone ever come across the Queerpedia from the other slide? No? Yes? No, but obviously, but in the room.
There's a couple of them there on the table that people can go read and say hi.
Love it. So definitely a cool resource for someone who's trying to understand and read more about, you know, the community and inclusivity and the terminology to use. That's literally where I got the information I have. Cool. And then gender justice. Perfect. Thank you so much. So part of activism around creating gender-sensitive spaces and institutions has arisen from feminist approaches that favor the prioritization of the marginalized who suffer under gender-blind policy and practice. It was a long way, an academic's way of saying basically, we've got policies in some places, but we're not able to make them real. In some cases, we don't have policies because people don't speak up, or people don't hear people speaking about how they're excluded from the policies we're trying to make, right? So all of these little quotes that I'm trying to rush through, I promise it'll come to make sense right at the end. Cool. So Well, I did do a bit of shameless marketing. That was from a study I did. Because, we basically realized that there's policies, but there's a lot more work to do. So UP does have a trans protocol. It's part of the anti-discrimination policy, but being in spaces like this means we need to then bring it to life, right? We need to then, university space, we're hoping everyone can sort of disseminate information and absorb. We're hoping to then take it forward and not just keep it in these spaces where we, I'm not trying to claim space, but where we're all working collectively to make sure that as many people come across this information and are as knowledgeable about what's going on and how we can make a difference. Cool, I'm gonna skippity-doo-dah to part 2, reproductive health justice. So in some of our training sessions, you'll find that we do have students who come, because a lot of people will come in just so they're like, they saw someone walk in, and they're like, boom, now they're in a conversation about, reproductive health justice. And what are we talking about there? I'll give you an example. You have students, for an example, who struggle so much that it's literally a health crisis to them, right? Some of us will never go to a public hospital if we can, because we know what happens there, right? And some people don't have the option to then fork out 1,000 rand, for example, for pre-exposure prophylaxis medication or post-exposure prophylaxis medication. I'm just going to throw those words in, and we can talk about it later if we do have time. But what are we talking about? Some people are not able to access these spaces, and there's going to be a reading, or rather a document I mentioned before I wrap up, a few more slides. It was one of the more comprehensive studies done in South African universities, right, about inclusivity and how trans students are being, shunned, and how even students, facilities like healthcare services do not have competent staff to deal with someone who's wondering, how am I going to take, medically transition? How am I going to legally transition? How am I going to socially transition? How do I bind my breasts? How do I bind myself so that I get a more androgynous appearance? These are the things that our health professionals in these spaces that seek to help students need to start being more knowledgeable about, right? So that's also coming up in research, definitely. That's what reproductive health and justice is. Just think of health issues that people with particular, interests and health issues have to go through, right? We're trying to make sure that our health professionals are getting the support, because you should know this stuff, but we're going to help you. That's why people who do trainings on gender sensitivity and awareness are there, right? But it also then means there needs to be a definitive policy that sort of, because we don't always get, the good Samaritans doing the Lord's work. We need people who are also going to understand that if it's part of your job, it's part of your job, right? You need to do this, and maybe then eventually we'll get people starting to be more inclusive and being more curious and being more competent at doing their jobs, right? This is all research. I'm not throwing daggers, right? The next one, a little bit more about reproductive health justice. These are all the different ways in which we could try, or what social or reproductive justice could mean, basically. Right, just have a look there. Things like access to abortion and morning after pills, the right to treatment for HIV, STIs, especially fertility, the right of queer people to have children and form families, quality nutrition, and all the different specific health needs that you have based on however you identify. We need our systems, and that's what people have said, that's what students have said, that's how research is also showing that we're lacking very much when it comes to realizing the rights to reproductive health justice. Cool. The next one, last few, is just more about reproductive health justice. I've already mentioned the study. It's by the Trans University Forum, which is the second bullet. Please do read up on it. When I read it, it really made me realize that, as much as we've got Centers for Sexuality, AIDS and Gender, we've got these beautiful student organizations that work with queer students, that seek to raise awareness around a few issues. There's so much work to do, right? There's so much work to do, and we cannot always rely on policy, but policy is a good way to start, right? And then we'll skip to the next one. Cool. And then a recent study conducted in KwaZulu-Natal, okay, this was 2019, stated that where sexual and reproductive health needs for the transgender community, people are involved, the guidelines must include contraceptive strategies and routine health checks targeted at the transgender community to minimize harm. You'll find people, in movies, people think it's just a movie thing. I'm sure some of us can relate to situations where we encounter people with some of these experiences. Genital mutilation, because you realize that this is actually not only reality, right? And instead of receiving all the care that should be dedicated to helping you identify how you want and structure your life and how you project yourself and how you identify the way you want, people end up resorting to harm, right? And that's what we're trying to avoid when we're trying to teach people about reproductive health justice. And the next slide, sexual justice. Sexual justice basically is when all people have the power and resources to make healthy decisions about their bodies, sexualities, and reproduction. Now, government plays a huge role in how people are said. So, Sia mentioned earlier on, when we're making policies, what do you want? Are we going to fire someone when they misgender someone? Are we going to fire someone? You know what I'm saying? So, as much as it's policy, as much as it's government, and these are all sort of entities that govern our behavior, we need to be more specific, right? So that people can have, the power to claim who they are and be who they want to be in those spaces. And now I'm leading on to the research that we're doing on trans inclusion in universities. What's happening is some of our transformation officers, or people who've been interviewing transformation officers, directors of student health services, race managers, are telling us that they're aware that research shows that the quality of life of a student who's marginalized by the university, of course, Charles, all of us, right? But when it comes to identity and feeling like you're part of your institution, when you don't feel part of an institution, worse, when you're actively marginalized, it has an impact on academics. So that's one way we're trying to, coerce, encourage institutions to make change. Because I get you say you're academies. Let's do it. And if you're not including people, your statistics are going down, right? So these are the things that we're trying to also get information about, because sometimes it's difficult to approach someone who doesn't care. We have people here, and it's so great to have a quality audience with us. But there's some people who are here because they just don't care, right? So when we're talking about inclusivity, about awareness, we also need to, it's sounding very colonization, Christian missionary, but we need to have targeted marketing. We don't need to always, and that's not to say we're trying to invite people that are anti the movement of inclusivity, but we do need to realize that some people have got real concerns based on their socialized ways, how they were socialized basically, which is where they were getting information. Cool, and then we'll share these slides, and then the last part I'm going to skip. So a concept I like, which is called intersectionality. It should be slide 13 if I'm not mistaken. So intersectionality says that we're doing all this great work, we're doing as much as we can, and we do though need to acknowledge that even if we're in safe spaces where we can have these conversations, where people will sign up or RSVP to join, and we'll have a robust discussion hopefully when I stop yapping, we're still different even in this space, and not different in an othering way, but we might identify on the same plane, but there's definitely other factors we need to realize exacerbate the injustices against people in the trans community, right? And what happens is race, it's a chat. Race, class, where you're from, your educational status, and we need to be real about it. Otherwise, we can never actually make proper change, because we'll always end up excluding people even in these spaces. And I was just sharing with our team just now, or rather our panel, that we had a decriminalization of sex work conversation happening on Monday, if I'm not mistaken. And what was happening is we had a stripper, and I can't wait for you to watch our podcast. And they were saying that even in the strip clubs in Joburg, you'll find that there's a racial divide. With the drag queens, there'll be hierarchies. We need to be very careful of that, because it does influence how successful we are in implementing policy, because, people on the outside who are waiting to see all these endeavors fail, right, are going to pinpoint those weaknesses. And we're going to lose people, and that's not what we want when we're trying to be inclusive. So yeah, that's intersectionality. That's a little bit of about the research we're doing, and that's the trans protocol. And at the University of Pretoria, the people we always try to, slide 15, to acknowledge in sort of making the trans protocol what it is, because they were doing it on the side. It wasn't part of their office hours per se. So on screen you've got basically the story, and you'll get the slides again. The two people I'd like to acknowledge, I'm standing in for Pierre Bourard, who's our Deputy Director at the Center for Sexualities, AIDS and Gender, and he has been, at the forefront, and he does, acknowledge that, he's worked with a team of people, but he is a great reference for how the university has come to even realize the trans protocol. And I'd also like to speak to Taruna Naidu, who's a colleague at the Center for Human Rights, who actually works at the SOGI unit at the Center for Human Rights. And she was also instrumental in the development of the trans protocol, and all the people who influenced, including the person who approached Pierre Bourard, right? There's more resources on our website if you want to read up and listen more. And then, so I think last slide, I'm just going to say, remember what the Just Leaders program is. Trans rights are human rights, and as much as not everyone wants to join the conversation, we do need to recognize and not question that this is a real chat, and we're dealing with people's lives. and who they want to be and their quality of life as well. We're not just saying we'll acknowledge you, right? How can we make your life better? And you shouldn't feel guilty that you're singling people out in terms of we want trans people to be recognized in this particular way. And it's not to say that we're removing everyone else. Sia told us earlier on, the LGBTQI plus community, but there are specific needs. If you're doing trans research, focus, do what you can, right? Because as much as we want to do a blanket approach, it's really not going to work. And just another note, many universities are saying, hey, we're still on LG, we're not even there by BTQI, and it's creating, right? So as much as, I can yapa along, and then inclusivity, that's literally all I can say from my side, and I'm looking forward to questions. Thank you.
I have a little intervention. Can I ask that we go back to the presentation quickly? In the gala one.
Yes, please go back.
Because I feel my friends, we did not do the things. I was hoping we can skip down to the slides. It's not working.
I'm sorry, just give it a chance. It's a small computer.
It's discriminating against us. Yeah, it's the slides around homophobia and transphobia.
That's a major thing. So basically, when we talk about the queer community, when we're talking about creating inclusive spaces, a lot of us sort of come with, what we brought from home. You might have grown up in a Jewish family, African traditional spirituality, wherever, whatever faith upbringing you might have had. Then you get into the space, it's a university. And for the first time, you're in a space where you meet people that believe in completely different things to you, or might even believe in gender expression in ways that you've never seen it before, right? So the whole idea behind the slide that Genevieve wants is to start having a conversation about, and I love how Genevieve is very conversational in these things, so you probably would be advised to not just see it as a presentation, but a chance for you to ask questions, to cite your own experiences or observations. Cite your own observations of transphobia or queerphobia, or intersex phobia, transphobia that you might see on campus or just around you in your community. And it's an opportunity for us to dissect that now in conversation and see how that can influence now your conversations around policy making and also your advocacy work in the JUST program, right? So as far as okay, are we winning? As far as transphobia is concerned, it's really defined as sort of the exercise of the prejudice that comes from just being acclimatized to bias. It's been normalized to see someone that's slightly different from the stereotypical definition of what a woman is, what a man is, and the whole performance of gender as well. And whenever we start to exercise these forms of bias, that's actually a form of being transphobic or intersexphobic, when you refuse to accept someone for who they are and you don't give them a chance to, number one, wear whatever they want to wear, express themselves however they want to express themselves without being interrogated or questioned, right? And to be honest, in these spaces, it's pretty normal for people to actually cite, for example, someone's dress as being too short or too long, or a guy for wearing makeup or something like that. Traditionally, the definitions of gender are very binary, right? Number one, I'm talking about binary all along. The assumption is people are aware of these terms, right? We are, right?
Is anybody not aware?
I'm not putting you on the spot. I'm not putting, it's a safe space. Nobody should be embarrassed. You can check me, it's okay.
Because this event is for, we've advertised for everybody, it's not just our mandatory position and what it is.
Yeah. Oh yeah, my version. Oh my, where would I even begin? So, within the university context, really, transphobia has two sort of dimensions to it. There's like institutional transphobia, and then there's like sort of personal manifestation of transphobia. So personal would be just your personal beliefs and people's different religious, preferences and so on, and how they want to now transpose their beliefs onto everybody else. I don't like your shoes. girls should wear shoes like that, guys should wear shoes like that, and all those things, girl, guy, whatever, those are all figments of creation, really. People put information aside, policies aside, design templates, things that were all man-made, essentially. And we can still change that. So why are we rigidly trying to crystallize that and make that, the Bible or the way, the truth, and the light for everyone, which is not the case. We're all diverse. Anyway, in my experience, though, I would say that, whenever I experienced institutional transphobia, it was more just in application forms. You just applying to study here in this university, and now they want you to declare if you're a man or a woman, you're sex, and I'm like, but why? Am I going to have sex with the lecturers? I mean, if I'm required to, I don't understand. Why do you need to know what's between my legs? But here we are. And that's an institutional issue. And at the end of the day, that can't be something that's private, that's done in a survey once you've entered the premises. I don't see that being necessary in the application process, to be honest. But here we are. And then student cards, like your student card might say Miss or Mr. in most universities or institutions, whether it's private sector or here in government learning institutions.
We do have an option to change your gender marker to Miss now.
Names. I like that. I like that.
Not that they know how to pronounce it, but we're getting there.
Yeah, sorry, I don't want to get to the officer and they're like, why didn't you tell them? So yeah, thank you for recognizing that. We have students that will approach any of the student peer organizations and speak out and UP&Out and the Center for Sexuality, Identity, and Gender. And we have students that are transitioning at the moment. So the space is definitely now open for people because of the university legal side. So obviously we're not at Home Affairs, we're still fighting that fight, right? But at least in the university space, you're able to change your pronouns, you're able to change your title in how they refer to you. And just a funny story, at Rhodes, and I'm saying Rhodes because everyone thinks we drink alcohol there, we do. But we also, there's a lot of programs that was made, shame, they can't do anything to me now, got the degree. So, and Rhodes is one of those spaces when you mentioned when you get to university, and I've had friends that purposely invite my friends or people I've known who come to festival. I'm not sure if anyone has heard of Arts Festival at Grahamstown. It's dying a little bit, but yeah. And they'll find a student with what is called a BA brain, and it'll be who they think is a man, assuming. They'll find who we would assume as male and female wearing different clothes, and they're like, you can literally see the shock on their faces, right? But you being an agent of change is you being like, talk to me, what's going on? Right, now let's see why. Now, why are you saying it can't be a skirt? Why are you wearing makeup? Where is it hurting you? Right? Where is it pinching you? Yeah, where are you getting hurt? Talk to me. Right? And it means that it's very difficult to do it in your personal spaces because you will lose people. That's the tough reality, right? Some of us shared the flag for today's Visibility Day, Trans Visibility Day, and some of us are fighting wars. Right, and that's why it's important to have these spaces as well. Why? So that we're able to help each other to fight these fights, because they're little myths and tricks, and but obviously personality tailored. So what was I saying basically? That's why those are the two things I thought about. You can change your pronouns, you can change your titles, and there's definitely now a procedure for how you can go about it, and it's all in the trans protocol. But definitely these students organizations are available to lead you to the correct person to talk to in order to make the process a bit smoother. And we do have gender dynamics, it comes up a lot as well, and Gala, when it comes to the resources, because at the moment, and that's something I think I do need to mention, unfortunately when it comes to people that don't fit the binary, people across the LGBTQI plus community, you'll find that health resources that are available to them are still put under HIV. So it's like a double stigma, and it's like, but why? And it's not to say that we're trying to know HIV and us, across the spectrum, but it's also just like that double burden of like, where does it end? Anyway, I'm passionate about this, I can go on forever.
Yeah. Well, thank you for flagging that. But yeah, it's critical that we are aware that the environments that we're in they're not separate from us. They are those spaces, and they are validated by our presence in those spaces. So those environments, if they fail to celebrate you as a woman, as a man, as non-binary, as trans, then those spaces should change, because these spaces are literally tailor-made and designed for us. We to maneuver in these spaces and do what we came here to do, right? And if these spaces are not doing that and failing to respect us in all our diversity, then they definitely need to be adjusted accordingly. So we spoke about application forms, we spoke about student cards, and I would also like to talk a little bit about institutional culture. So institutional culture is just, the simple things, like almost like the heartbeat of an institution. Just like your body, it's like natural for you to have a heartbeat. You wouldn't like find this abnormal. But somebody else who puts, their fingers on your pulse, on your what is it, wrist, to feel out your pulse. They notice if it's too fast or if it's too slow. And that's what institutional culture is. It's almost invisible. It's like a behavior that's accepted or normalized. That's the standard. It's what people do every day, all the time. It's what makes that institution what it is. But we don't really notice the things that are not working, the things that are failing, until somebody comes into the space who has their own individual sort of experience that's unique to that individual, particularly people that are gender diverse, that are not necessarily fitting within the binary, that would need access to inclusions. And that's another problem, inclusion blocks, toilets, right? And then also, there's this thing, okay, even your learning materials, and the way your lecturers speak to you and address different concepts and like spell out different things to you, that they shouldn't be very gendered in the way they express that. If they do that as well, then they should try to be diverse. If you're going to be intentionally say men and women, then you better say, non-binary individuals as well. You can't just, count a particular section of the population and not everybody else. Yeah.
Or as I like to say, labels and spoons, because that's gender.
Yes, flames. Yeah, I agree with you there.
So perhaps maybe now's a good time to open up the roundtable so people can start, asking questions and engaging. So I'm going to do that.
Yeah.
I already said everything I was going to say.
Well, no one has that. You can, of course, continue speaking. If no one has their hand up, just continue speaking.
Okay,
And
yeah.
can I just say,
Do the thing.
you guys must just check if there's any comments. Thank you.
Yeah. So I mean, in the work that we do, we are very intentional about outlining the fact that if you don't speak up as students, if you don't say that listen, I'm uncomfortable with this, if someone is sexually harassing you, if there is something about the institution, whether it's lecturers, whether it's the student community, whether it's even the residents themselves, like the residencies rather, if they themselves are structured in a way that's not working for you as students, you can have that changed. And literally universities have renovations all the time for the purpose of tailoring or catering rather to the student population and the growing and ever-changing needs of the student community. So when you don't speak up, it's not just about you being some glamorous somebody, diva, whatnot. It's literally basic. Like this university is getting paid by you or your bursary for you to be here. So they have to do what you want them to do in order for you to feel comfortable so you can actually study in the space. And if you are having to wear things that you're uncomfortable in just so you can avoid being bullied and made fun of, that's not right. That's bullying. And that's an infringement on your rights to be comfortable in whatever it is that you want to wear, whether it is a hijab, whether it's a mini skirt, whether it's glittery sneakers, or anything for that matter, as long as it's within your scope of gender expression, let that be your truth. And I guess in this conversation, I guess it's more about people sort of vocalizing what they've seen as transphobia or intersex phobia or just queerphobia in general, but also recommendations of what they see as possible solutions so that you can sort of peer educate each other as well and see if we can start snowballing the conversation into a policy as well, even beyond this point. Yeah.
I have a question about you can sort of mandate things for lecturers, but how do you change the space amongst students? Because I find that to be a lot more difficult. And I've tried before, and I think that some people also feel like there's still a debate to be had, a debate about trans rights, but it's not a debate.
Yeah.
It is a fact, it is a reality, and it needs to change. So I want to get more advice on how do we navigate with our fellow students.
Yeah.
We have a lot of students here who perhaps have the same views, but what about the students who don't?
Yeah. I mean, to one strategy that I've come to appreciate is having, number one, like what you just said, those forums that you normally have, the round table, and using that as a benchmark or a space where people talk about what's going on in the community, even if it's just amongst yourselves as part of the JUST program. But now also strategizing as the team on how you're going to colonize the space and make but you know what I mean? Like transform the space and make it more inclusive. Colonize. But yes, if you get my drift. For me, I like being intentional about it. Like you cannot you cannot sugarcoat it. You've got to hit where it hurts. So for me, I usually start by showing. You have to show some of what they're doing in order for them to understand what they're doing, right? So for example, if I have an issue with, for example, Trump making fun of a particular race in the US, I don't know, making insinuations about their attire or something like that. Trump might find that to be normal. And that's just an example. I might not have issues with Trump. I might think he's fantastic. Or maybe I don't like him. Who knows? But I'm just making an example. If he makes fun of someone and that person is uncomfortable, whether I like him or not, he should be checked. And that should be a universal thing. And in your strategizing, you need to make sure that you hit them where it hurts and show them what they're doing. As in maybe act it out or show them a clip on video and be like, this is what you're doing to the people. This is an example of what's going on out there in the world. And now that you're here at the university, this is an opportunity for you to choose. Do you want to be these people? Are you a Hitler in the making? Doing it in the microcosm environment of the university? Or are you now a person who's going to be intentional about what you pick up here in this university environment to become, the future version of yourself that you would be proud of? And I do think that these spaces, even though we're all just trying to get pieces of paper that are going to get us jobs and rich and all kinds of nice things, that we need to also learn to be people. People that are able to live with other people, lead other people, guide other people, be examples to other people in ways that we can be proud of, but also in ways that other people can learn from us. And if we're positive about it, if we are intentionally being inclusive of everyone, including people living with disabilities, including multiple and variety and wide spectrum of religions and beliefs and cultures and traditions and races and sexual orientations and now gender identity, then we are really becoming what we call a democratic rainbow nation, so to speak. And unfortunately, when we don't hit where it hurts, if we just keep saying, oh, we're just doing queer rights, people don't realize that they're also getting oppressed. There's a lot of, I'm telling you, everyone has some form of oppression that they're experiencing within the university context. And you gotta hit where it hurts. If you see someone is for example, I don't know, an employee here at the university and you are doing a training with the staff here, you're going to call them aside and say, oh, I know very much that there's a gender pay gap. Are you aware of that? And as a feminist in the JUST program, I'm excited to have this conversation with all of you to actually, introduce the theme and the concept of the sort of oppression that is inflicted upon women and the feminine genders, in our population, and how that now ties into how we see manifestation of oppression and discrimination within the queer community. Why are we doing this? It's already happening to you. It's already happening to some members in this room. Why is it okay now for the queer community to be experiencing another form of oppression just because we don't believe in who they are and how they live their lives? And then start the conversation from there. And to be honest, whenever we're having these conversations, a lot of you just think you're just talking. When in fact you're carving out a future for yourself, you're developing yourself, and the only way to do that is acclimatizing yourself to the world around you. If you are living in Alaska, for example, you've got to navigate living in the ice. You've got to have your wolves, wild dogs, whatnot, pulling your sleighs. You've got to learn to chop the wood. You've got to learn to set the fire. You've got to learn to hunt for the animals and cook them and burn them on the fire dry. Yeah, right? You've got to be acclimatized to the environment that you're in. And essentially, if you're going to be a business person, you're running your consultancy as an accountant, as a lawyer, as a photographer, as a social worker, a doctor, whatever vocation that you're training into, you're definitely not going to be only having clients that are Jewish if you're a Jew, or Christian if you're a Christian, or Hindu if you're a Hindu. You're gonna have to literally take off the mask of pretending to be ignorant and be aware of the fact that you're living in the real world where there are real human beings who must be respected just like you, just like me, just like all of us in this room. And if we can't do that, we'll never be able to survive in the real world. And that's essentially what real social justice is about. Yeah, inclusivity.
I just wanted to say, following on to Karina's question, I mean, I find a lot of the time when you have an institution that does a certain thing, it becomes more universally accepted by its members. Because if, obviously, institutions are seen as this massive thing that are right and good and what society is aimed to be. It's academia. Academia is like the height of society, being intelligent, etc. So if your academia chooses to pursue rights of everyone and chooses to try to deconstruct oppression, then people will start to realize, especially the people that form the institution, they will realize that this is what needs to be done. Does that make sense?
I'll be the microphone transferring person. I'm probably not in the best position to be walking around here. Just you can come a bit closer if you don't mind.
Sorry, I'm already nervous.
Okay.
It's just okay. I'm already maybe try this one.
I think it's died. Yeah, that's a flashing light there.
It's really just a comment, and
I'd like to hear what everyone thinks, especially it's a comment in relation to the presentation and also your question, which is that with targeted marketing or trying to really relate their realities into their education so that they receive it. Do we observe, let's say this particular example, as like true progress, where we're fighting for gender neutral uniforms, and one, let's say, your typical cisgendered heterosexual male identified individual says, well, if you want pants and everything, well, I get to wear a skirt. Do we really observe that as a true progress with targeted marketing in mind? Or is it reductive in someone else's reality because it's just a response, but it can feel as mocking? Is it a true reflection of the information we're supplying you, the shift we're trying to evolve in that space that you coexist with us in? So do we, as that person, accept that as, oh wow, okay, I guess you get the point if you're saying that, or is it just reductive? Especially in relation to people outside, members outside. Because, yeah.
I think I'm going to let the panel answer because yes, please.
Hello. I was about to. Hey. Yeah. I'm not 100% sure if this is going to answer specifically, but I think this is extremely important. What you're bringing up here, you need to understand that there are layers to this. And in relation to power structures that exist in society, we don't just lightly use the term transphobia and homophobia. These are all linked to patriarchy, heteronormativity, heterosexism, cisnormativity, right? In the world today, there are people who do not believe that we exist as gender diverse and transgender people. But you can see that we are sitting right here, we exist. The argument often will be, well, if you want to wear what you want to wear, or use the pronouns that you want to use, then I can just do whatever I want. I can also wear what I want to wear, and I can also use whatever bathroom I want to use. And what you are doing there is you're referring to a very common response. It's very well known internationally as the anti-gender movement. We see this with authors like J.K. Rowling. We see leaders in the world that are causing havoc and war, quoting J.K. Rowling, in order to actually, substantiate war. This is not something that we talk about in relation to theory. This is something that we talk about in relation to lived experience. when you speak about people outside of the university, that is exactly what we need to be talking about. The institution is a space, absolutely, where minds are meant to be open, where discussions are meant to be had, where critical thinking is encouraged. Yet, institutions are one of the most heterosexist places that exist. They are archaic and colonial, and exist within archaic power structures that still enact themselves on bodies that are not white, that are not heterosexual, that are not male, that do not fit binaries. And we fight that all the time, through legislation, through research, yes, through programming, through workshopping, but it's far more holistic than that. Because it's our lived experiences. Today is Trans Day of Visibility. What does that mean? I think about all of my trans siblings today. I had the best day on social media. I don't know if you did. Seeing all your siblings looking amazing, wearing the trans colors, posing, looking amazing, and saying, I am here, I exist, I am visible. I have a right to live my life, and I have a right to affirm my gender identity however I wish to do so. Because trans rights are not special rights, they are human rights. Right? So that's the conversation, I think, that needs to be had in institutions of higher learning, that doesn't just speak to a policy, but actually speaks to the lived experiences of trans and gender diverse persons, whether they are staff or students, or visitors, or parents, or cousins, or siblings. So that's where I believe this conversation should go within these kinds of forums, right?
Okay, there's a person over there who had a question. Oh, you don't answer the question. And then I have a question from someone who's watching this stream of this, and I'm not using the mic because I'm right here by the speaker and it'll then be very loud. So someone online says, regarding, like lived experiences and gender expression, to people who aren't woke, as an openly gay man, I often wear nail polish as a way to interact with my gender identity. How do I explain that I'm still a man? It becomes particularly challenging to inform people in a public, when speaking in a public capacity. So advice on that kind of thing would be great.
Okay. I mean, it depends on the context. It really depends on the context. Like if that person is kind of exploring the gender expression in a workspace, I think it's important for them to kind of get the HR involved in as well. I mean, in the programs that I've been involved in, for example, I would work with an HR department to create like an awareness workshop on gender. And that's really normal in modern workspaces now, where if someone feels that there is a manifestation of some kind of toxic masculinity or policing of gender expression within the office space or working environment, then you can check with HR. But I guess in this particular instance, if that person is a student, then SRC is the best space. And then you can create events around creating that awareness. I mean, for me, I love the fact that you've got such a huge university. You could do so much. There's pride celebrations, there are like gender celebration, events that you could have, feminism events, and be very intentional in those events to work in the messaging, the programming that says that the binary is not the way, the truth, and the light. Just men, just women don't only exist in this world. We've got, a mix and a blend. And even within those scopes of existence, we can, express ourselves however we see fit without needing to be policed or judged. And I know it's a huge sort of step to take to say make the microcosm problem an epic sort of statewide thing. But I believe that's where the change happens, because generally if one person is experiencing it, then it's probably an indication of a culture that's manifesting in that space, and it's important for that person to kind of speak out even through changing the structure itself. For me, myself, whenever I deal with a particular individual that is being weird with me, I like to just, I don't like being extremely direct with it immediately. I usually, do something as simple as giving them a little pamphlet with something that speaks to gender inclusivity. And be like, hey, what do you think about this? Let's talk about it.
It's so passive, I love it.
Let's go popcorn, or let's go have coffee, or whatever it is, and have a conversation to start from there. And if you pick up that there's something really, really hectic about this person, then recommend someone to assist. In this particular instance, I mean, if you are in a university space, the SRC is number one. Be intentional about having events around inclusion and awareness. And to be honest, if you pick up on one, generally there's a whole other community of people that need that awareness anyway. So use that chance. Yeah.
Where the nails, honey?
Where the nails?
Where the nails, honey? How we put on nail polish?
A very nice example of that is one of the people that I follow on Instagram, Matt.
Okay.
Is forever showing up. He has a whole campaign where someone said, "Bring back manly men," and he has created T-shirts in bright pink that says, "Bring back manly men," just to reaffirm that no matter how you express your gender, if you identify as male, you are still a manly man. No matter if you have glittery nails or short-cut nails and you're covered in sodas.
I like that image though. I like that image.
I don't know if this is working. My question was, in the LGBTQI space, there is, like you said, somewhat of a division in terms of labels, and in terms of especially bisexuality and pansexuality, quite a few people feel like bisexuality is transphobic in and of itself, and that it is exclusionary of trans people. And so how do you sort of go about educating people on that within the community as well as outside the community?
That's my question.
I mean, I guess there are two elements to that question that I wanted to tackle. So number one, sort of the internal stigma around the bisexual community is the fact that just because someone might be seen as an example of what a gay person is, they'll say, "Oh no, but we saw John, and John came out as gay and is now dating a woman. So why why should I worry about you taking this thing seriously? Maybe it's a phase." And generally, a lot of parents see that. You see examples of people being bi, and they want to now slap those labels on people that are either lesbian or gay or even trans. And say, "Oh, these things are phases," and "Oh, you change, chocolate change and whatnot." At the end of the day, someone who's bi has a right to change their partners as they see fit, to be honest, with someone who's pansexual, and that shouldn't be stigmatized. But I guess the inflicted now perceptions and bias are now, attaching, a lack of validity and even acceptance for the other identities and sexual orientations within the LGBTQI plus background. And then when we look at the broader community now, when we look at the fact that those people are now bi, I would say that the stigma shouldn't be a platform for people to even debate someone's right to date whoever they want to date, but it becomes that in some cases because now you're stigmatized, you're seen as, "Hey, I saw you with a woman, why are you now changing?" And to be honest, if you are experiencing that or if you see that manifest, I think it's an opportunity for you to question that. And how we go about doing that, number one, celebrate the human rights of the individuals, telling everyone that, listen, you are who you are, and your expression of your sexual orientation, your gender identity is yours and yours alone. And the politics of that, among other people, is definitely not within the realm of rights. Our rights are limited to our bodies, and outside of our bodies, we cannot start trying to oppress others in order for us to feel comfortable. And essentially, whenever we have these awareness workshops, we use materials like videos, movies, posters, books, so many resources that, number one, quote real situations in history, looking at people that have overcome these circumstances and are living their lives out and freely, at least in those contexts, in those films or episodes, like Pose, for example. I think Pose is an amazing resource that we use quite a lot. Pose, yeah. And Pose kind of breaks those stereotypes, those walls now, talking about the human rights and how, you can have a lot of fun with your rights, just use them here, right here, on you, and not run around expecting everybody else to perform femininity just like you, masculinity just like you, in asexuality or agender expression like everybody else, but themselves can be unique.
Sorry, this question is on the same topic, so no, expect to speak a little bit.
Hello.
Yes.
Is it?
Yeah, it's on.
Okay. So, I've seen this post on Facebook a couple of times and have been confused because I was one who used to, I don't know if I should say used to identify as pan, and then every time I came across these posts, I was like, is this even align with me? But I'll be so anybody can clarify it for me. Okay, cool. So it says, white people are adamant that there is a difference between pansexuality and bisexuality when the mere idea of trying to differentiate between the two is clearly transphobic. If pansexuality doesn't mean being sexually attracted to pans, the joke of a sexual orientation like metrosexuality, then it needs to find its way out of the LGBT plus community. Not that it ever had a place here. We already have a label for people who like all genders. It's called bisexuality. This discourse is irritating to say the least. So, like, every time I see something like that, it strays me further away from identifying as pan because I'm still learning about everything. So every time I would, when a person asks, so what do I identify as? I'd say pan, but I feel some sort of discomfort knowing that there are people who think like this. So I just need clarification on that.
If I can just quickly respond to that, I think it's really interesting that we are getting to this level of complexity in relation to sexualities, right? So when we read discourses that kind of critically think through how bisexuality and pansexuality, in its kind of didactic form, the way that we would always present it, can really indicate transphobia. We need to be thinking through sort of why we are still also kind of putting ourselves in the cis-normative binary when we're thinking through all of sexuality, because now we're conflating gender with sexuality, and we need to not conflate these two things together. That becomes a huge problem that we see in many discourses out there, the conflation of the two things. So if you are bisexual, and I've got a really nice slide on this, but I'll share it with you, which basically defines bisexuality not in terms of the binary, but rather speaks about people who are attracted to more than one gender. When I say you're attracted to more than one gender, it could mean that you identify as bisexual, and it can also mean that you identify as pan. It really is about how you self-identify. And how do you find yourself in pansexuality? What does pansexuality mean to you in relation to the spectrum? Because pansexuality is very different for many people. You could be pansexual and be, for example, more on the spectrum of being attracted to masc-presenting people. So this could include people who are cis women. This could include people who are cis men. This could include non-binary people and trans people. This could include a whole range of gender representations. But then pansexuality also is speaking about sexuality. So does that mean that you can be attracted to a variety of different sexualities? Again, it could, but it's up to you as an individual to find yourself within this wonderful alphabet gang of ours, right? We need to open up our minds when we start to think about sexuality. It's something that is fluid, and the fascinating part of it as well is that it's something that is not stagnant. So it doesn't always stay the same. It can change over time. I mean, I'm very grateful that I have a bisexual father, otherwise I wouldn't be here today, right? So at the end of the day, I think those critical engagements are very important. And I think they come from a place of trans people also feeling rejected by, the particular labels that we see in the acronym, right? So here, bisexual, when I talk about it, it's an umbrella term used to describe a romantic and or sexual orientation to more than one gender. So when we say romantic and or, we're including asexuality, because asexuality in itself is a spectrum, right? So we need to start realizing that all of us, it doesn't matter if we're part of the alphabet gang or not, we all have internalized cis-normative, heterosexist, and patriarchal forces at play. They're there, and sometimes they come out, right? So I think it's really fascinating that you bring up these points, because where do you find yourself in that spectrum, for example? And I've seen that more and more young people today are identifying as fluid. It's happening, people. There's a queer takeover. It's fluid. Okay, but it's about where you find yourself within it.
Kelly has been waiting to ask her question, Shane.
Recently I had an experience with a person, and it's actually an experience that has been happening throughout my life, where a person is like, I have no problem with the queer space, but I don't want to learn about it, and I don't want to engage with it in any way. Like, I have no queer friends, I have no normal queer experiences, no interactions with the queer space at all. Also, this can also form as a part of, I'm not homophobic because I have homosexual friends. So how do you deal with them? Because I had let me not spill anything. They also said, if you go for a girl after you've been interested in the guy, it's a huge ego diss to the guy. How do you? Because when I just heard about that, I was just like, oh my god, I'm seeing red. What do I do? How do I educate this person in a non-aggressive, pissed off queer person way? Where do I go?
I'll just comment on the side of being a trainer. So I did wear this badge because we're doing shameless marketing. We're all doing great work, right? So in training, you'll find someone who'll be like, no. I can learn about HIV, democracy, but I don't really want to learn about. And you have people say, I have gay friends, but they mustn't do their gay things around me, or they mustn't tell me their gay stories. And you're like, what is your friendship based on?
Exactly.
So, and you also mentioned something about, when you start exploring yourself, well, I don't mean sexually, but you start exploring who you are, rather. Feel free to explore yourself as well. And you'll get people, whether they decide to come out, which can be ridiculous, if people are forced to do so. And I think it's a case of, I'm just going to go all the way back and acknowledge two things that my colleagues mentioned here, about as much as two things, going back. You mentioned your father, you mentioned parents being very important in expanding the conversation, right? And it doesn't just begin in university where now you're far from home. I'm from Mlazi in KZN. I think you're also from Mlazi. Yeah, definitely, I read it on you. So, and you'll find that yes, now I'm far from home, I'm there in Grahamstown, small little town with the donkeys and the alcohol away. But it shouldn't begin there, right?
Yeah.
It really, and I, as much as you're here today because of your father, I'm here because of my mom, and at least from the HIV perspective, up until to where I am today, enforcing social justice, what am I talking about? So it really does begin with our socializing institutions. I'm hoping that you'll take home those two terms, intersectionality and socializing institutions, which can be a university space, a school, a prison, a juvie, a church. Social media has become an institution as well, television, right, which was sold buddies for us older people, right? So these are the things, it really does begin there. By the time we're at university, we're fighting such a bigger problem. And I'm sure as well as project managers and whatnot, you'll attend conversations from different countries in Africa, and you'll hear that They don't even have policies because parents are saying, I can't teach my child about all these other genders because it will create gay people and anarchy. I can't tell my child about sex because I'm going to create sex workers. And you're like, man, just because you're not talking about it doesn't mean other kids are not going to create fake information, misinformation, you know, lack of sound knowledge, right? So I think back, it really begins in these spaces and having people to stand up, right, and talk about these issues. And I think it sort of segues me a little bit into the other important thing you mentioned. It is a matter of experience, and that's why I respect my position as someone who, when coming into this space, it's strange to be like, oh, I experimented in varsity. Does that make me bisexual? But why do I even have to define? Like, what if I'm in a relationship, I decide to open up that space and I become polyamorous, right? So I agree. This whole definition thing can be productive, so it will be helpful, but we shouldn't be forcing people to do it at their own peril and harm, where now people are being forced into identity crises, right? So I think as much as you probably want to go back to your first time, whether it was a woman or a man, but listen, I used to like pussy, put in my butt. I'm all about that now. Run it, right? All about that life. So it's really such a personal thing. It's also political, right? But really, the stress that some people have in terms of taking over, you know, the spectrum. No, we need to now, bisexuality needs to be a thing, or you need to tell us, which one is it? I don't need to tell you, Jack.
Yeah.
Right? So I think going forward for us, when we say inclusivity, it's not good to pick and choose. And you have people who have contributed to the movement who are transphobic, but would be bisexual, who are, you know, like homophobic, and they'll say, no, but you know, I prefer when people just don't identify. There's so many politics within the movement, and that's why I spoke about intersectionality earlier on, right? You can't ignore the reality, right? And when we speak of, I'll keep mentioning Geeta November, please look them up as well. Amazing person in Cape Town. Yes, we'll share this with. And we were able to have a conversation about poverty and how trans people, because of what they had to go through, leaving home, right? And obviously now I'm taking over, and I think I'm going to move that to the more experiential part if it's open to this conversation. But we need to acknowledge all those intersections, right? Around class, around education status. And one thing I always tell people that I train, we may be in university, I was on to, not starving students, but I didn't prioritize my money very well because of the alcohol. What am I trying to say, right? We went to events because we wanted food, and we didn't always get what we wanted. We wanted a fresh pair of glittery nails and sneakers. And what does that mean, right? We need to acknowledge that we can all be different in all those different ways. But we're in university, we might be starving students. You might be a student from an affluent space. You might be living in a commune costing 7K, another 2.5K, and your room is right behind the TV and there's a curtain. These are the things. But you're in a university space, and I think one thing we always need to acknowledge is, back where you're from, you're still privileged.
Yeah.
So you need to acknowledge that, right? You really do need to acknowledge it. I feel like it's became preachy. But yeah, the bottom line is intersectionality, and you don't need to be explaining to people and going back and doing an apology world tour. And like, COVID, I had to do apology. I was like, why am I doing this? You're here, most. It is what it is. So yeah, I think that
Hassan has a comment, then, I'm sorry, I don't know your name, but you're next, and then you, and then you, and then you. I have this list, it's on WhatsApp, it's not very clear. Very much how I feel right now. You have a mic? Okay, I'm going to take this one there for now.
Just like to segue back to what you were saying in the very beginning with education and how important it is to actually bring it into the education system. Because not everyone gets to go to university, and especially with what's currently happening in the US, I know that it's not really applicable to us, but it brings to light a lot of issues.
Yeah.
Like for example, where they refuse to bring education into schools. That's not going to stop your kids from being gay.
Don't say cable.
Exactly. It's that whole thing of, I've seen heterosexual people on TV all my life. I didn't turn out straight. Like, you failed. It's just the whole fact of not everyone has access to university. It's so necessary to have that at least the high school level. You know, 3 grades
Also, I do want to point out that it is 7:20. This thing officially ends at 7:30, just so everyone is aware. Please go ahead.
This comment I had while the conversation was still over there, so it moved on to be answered in some of the responses, but I really did want to mention that I think the underrated realization, or maybe we do realize it in the space, that has to do with, they mentioned sexual fluidity, and a lot of how your sexuality can evolve has to do with access to information and the education, and the fact that there's evolution in how we are learning about the space and everything. I believe now the challenge would be, how do we then distribute this education? Because imagine how liberating it is when someone finds more information on clarity of who they really are. So instead of wondering why do they change their sexuality, no, it's them discovering in pieces of information that seems to be relevant or speaks to them. But how do we then make it accessible in communities and to individuals who don't even have access to these spaces? That's the challenge I now really believe we have at hand. Thank you.
Please. So I think it's a case of one of the many things we can do is, it's a lot of labor. Yeah. So we are now custodians and representatives of this information that we're learning. You know, that yes, we know how to say LGBT as fast as we can. We can have a quick competition right now. Don't start saying the eyes closed, the shirt open. We know the basics. But it's on us to go deeper, right? And then also take it into our spaces. Because government has a lot of work to do. Universities have a lot of work to do. Churches have a lot of work to do. All these socializing institutions have a lot of work to do, right? But the truth is, and I'm not saying at the peril of your mental health, but we do also have a role to play now. We do need to at least speak up. And it's not, you don't need a megaphone. There's so many different ways you can go about it. You can create, I'm not endorsing fake accounts, right? Trolling, but you can join different organizations. Change things from the inside, right? See, it's also based on your personality. Sarah was telling us that we're like, oh wait, this happened. So what do you think about this? Right? Me! Let's talk now. What's your problem? Where is the bitch? You know, all comments, it's personality based, right? And it's great to be in these spaces because then you realize, oh, okay, cool. 10 years experience in the industry, the space. This is how they approach things. And you can learn a little bit and borrow, right? I don't think anyone's gonna be like, you use my slide and you change. No. Right? So who you are. Right? That's why we have these conversations. So that you can take what you want, sift through, and use what works for you. Right? I think that's one of the ways we can try and get it to the guys, the MLAs, we can get it to their rural false I used to think it's a farm, it's not. You can get it inside CEO meetings, you can get it, there's so many spaces, but make it your own, see what works for you, right? Because not all of us have the same strengths, and that's the beauty, right? Inclusivity, but respecting diversity. Yeah.
Thank you.
I have no idea if this is last. So I am an educator, so I am the one on the inside. That's the reason that I came to this talk, so I can sort of see how I can start. But the point was brought like earlier, I think, I don't even remember at this point because so much was brought up, at least what I took from it, is that people in university do have more access to this like support, this LGBT support. And cool, I'm glad that we have it, but it should start earlier. I mean, in high school, I tried to start an LGBT group, just a support group for people in the LGBT. I had a whole thing when it came to deal with bullying and everything, and I could tell that my school didn't even read my portfolio because they denied me flat out. They had a meeting about it, but denied me flat out. So how do we start these support systems in high schools, whether it be rural, urban? How do we start it if the government is so arrogant, and even high school systems are so arrogant that they're like, no, we're going to offend the cis heteronormative. Okay, but you're offending us. Yeah. You're not supporting us. You're supporting the cis heteronormative. It's not fair. So how do we start systems like that in high schools?
Yeah, okay.
I can speak loudly, I guess. I think the point that you're bringing up is crucial, actually, today. So, a number of organizations in Gauteng are on a social inclusion working group at the moment with the Department of Basic Education. And I don't speak alone, I know I speak with many of us who are on that group, who have been working on these guidelines for gender and sexual diversity for the Department of Basic Education to reach a desk, to be approved, to become policy. We are still on the guidelines phase of this process, okay? Today, on Trans Day of Visibility, there was a presentation made by our colleagues at the Department of Basic Education to get us one step closer to that. And that is a stride forward. But as an educator, on the ground, how do you become that radical voice that stands up against that particular archaic power structure, which is known as the secondary school system of South Africa, very binary, right? And also very heterosexist. How do you as an educator become that person on the inside who is going to be using anti-oppressive education techniques? I would definitely encourage you to read more, and I will give you so much material that I'm currently reading for hashtag I'm a PhD candidate now, but anyway. And what you're speaking about right now, I'm very passionate about because I'm focusing specifically on pre-service educators, right? Because I believe that when you're dealing with people who are actually doing the PGCE, before they get to the classroom, you are able to give them the tools to become radical educators. Because we need to not only be teaching them how to do the ABCs, but how to actually stand up against an oppressive system. Exactly. That's how you do it. And you do it by building allyship as strategically as you can. You can never work in isolation. You work with NGOs. You make sure you have the backup. As an educator in the school, if you want to start a support group for these high school learners, then you go and you reach out to organizations. There's an organization in Pretoria called LGBTI Wellbeing. Reach out to them. Reach out. No. It's always funny. Ghana does a lot of work in this resource development area as well. But when you have the clout to actually go to your principal with a letter that is signed by 5 or 6 NGOs and CSANG and Transworks Global and Up and Out and Up and Out.
We don't do much.
You
We
have
can
backup.
send it to the people in the WhatsApp group and be like, don't you all just want to go sign this?
And it's not easy to do that within a school system, and I really, really empathize with that. It takes that agent of change in the school, but you literally have to become an agent of change that is radical, that is standing up against oppressive systems that are keeping our trans and our LGBTI learners on the outskirts of the system. Our trans and gender diverse people are unemployed today because of this. It has ricochet effects that are beyond any of our understanding, right? So you are within your human right to start an LGBTI support group in your school. And Gala will support you, Transworks Global will support you, CSANG, so many organizations will stand behind you if you want to do that. And sometimes that's all it takes, because fight bureaucracy with bureaucracy. Right?
Please tell your students what dental dams are.
Yes, I literally educated them on this.
It kills me. People show up at Up and Out and they're like, I'm a lesbian, I've been a lesbian for years, I have no idea what a dental dam is.
Do you
I'm
want
like,
free condoms? I can get some upstairs.
we have free condoms, we need dental dams.
I'm so sorry. But you can make the condom into a dental dam.
Yeah, but like,
but you want that, but it's like,
it's the principle of the thing.
Okay, we're going to accept one last question because we are at the end of the proposal.
This is back to Katie's question where she asked about being in a conversation with somebody who says things like, oh no, I acknowledge that there are queer people, but I don't want to involve myself with that. I feel like it also goes back to the, like the lady said, that you need to learn in your social institutions what things are, how they work. But what happens then when a person comes from a family that is just as strict as they are? They don't want to learn. They think that it's wrong. They think that these things shouldn't be shown on TV. When they go to school, if people go to Christian school, they go to school and they're not shown this side of the world. So then what happens? How do you then sit this person down and like a very stubborn person who just doesn't want to learn? How do you then leave them? You don't feel like because it's good for your mental health, or do you take the time to break it down instead?
That's a deep one. I mean, I guess it depends on the particular context. Like if you are, if that person is your guardian, for example, then perhaps, oh gosh, I think I just felt a tic-tac land on the ground.
You dropped your mask.
Yeah, if it's your guardian, then maybe wait until you come of age and then tell them once you're already read at varsity in a safe space and you won't be kicked out. But I mean, it's a massive wow. But yeah, beyond that, if it's just a friend who is like hard-headed and that doesn't understand the stuff, I think it's important that you, number one, make them aware that they are living in the real world, as in, at the end of the day, whatever job that you're going to go into, it's going to require you to be inclusive, to be woke, as with regard to the power structures and the various ways that you can discriminate in order for you to provide those services in a way that makes sense, that's productive. I mean, I can imagine if I am Christian and I say, I'm not going to serve any Muslims, and I am a lecturer at university, or I'm a tutor, or I'm a peer educator under the JUST program, and I'm only going to work with Jewish people because I'm Jewish. It's kind of going to limit your scope of impact. And I mean, to be honest, at the end of the day, it's really about respect. And if that person wants to be respected, they didn't even have to reciprocate that. And you need to point out that pain point to say you're experiencing a person in various ways, and point it out, whether they're a person of color, whether they're with disability, whether they are of a particular religion. There's so many ways that bias is inflicted upon us through power structures and bias, etc. And you can point those out and use those as the salts, in the wound to make them realize that, hey, there's something that needs to be done about this because it's time to change. And then obviously, bond using materials, resources, exciting resources that you can get from Gala, and pose even, which is a nice start, I believe, because it's funny, it promotes conversations, at the same time it hits you in a way that's not very direct, it's like entertaining, yet it's sinking the message in. Patterson, very quickly.
Yes, just like that. So basically the main concept is collaborate and boost queer content creators.
And use the genderbread person. I love the genderbread person. I got so excited just now when you mentioned your cool slide. I was like, I saw the genderbread person and I was so excited about it.
I made it happen. I made it work. All right. So I'd just like to say thank you guys so much for coming to our talk. We really appreciate the support. And thank you to our speakers. Here's some little gifts for you. Oh, thank if there's any other further questions, please forward it to us. And any closing remarks from
Yes, we do have closing remarks. Thank you for this platform. It was so exciting to have this conversation. And most of all, I'm really excited to see how many people actually turned out, seeing as this is not like, are you getting credits for this?
No.
See?
No. We just felt like this. We just felt like this.
Wow, this is amazing. Yeah, I'm impressed. I'm really impressed. It means that there is an inclusive horizon out there, at least in the spaces when I was back in varsity, in undergrad, this was definitely never going to happen. Never. In fact, you would have found a whole posse of people outside waiting, and making noise and saying they don't want this to happen. And I'm just amazed at how woke you are, and the fact that you raise such critical topics and themes,
and I'm excited to see what you're going to do in terms of making that policy implementable, the trans policy that you've got, and also taking part, being more active in the structures that you've got here in terms of inclusivity here in this campus and even beyond. Yeah, let's keep the conversation going. See you on the social media streets. The official Sia, follow me everywhere.
Yes.
Sia is also an extraordinary musician. He is. Just asking.
Okay, yes. Invite me to one of your online hybrid round table,
Singing extravaganza. I just wanted to also say that oftentimes this content, these conversations are always in English in our spaces, right? Maybe some people are having it in Afrikaans here at the Universiteit van Pretoria. I'm not sure.
Yeah.
But it's often very difficult to access, especially when we are speaking to people who, in essence, we really want to reach and we want to change minds and hearts. So when we're pushing queer content creation, right, we really, really believe in local content creation that is made by queer people, specifically black queer folks, for black queer folks, and we do not encourage that kind of creation in English. It's really around finding a voice to do so. So if you go to the Gala Queer Archive YouTube channel, you'll see a video called Geleza Diaries featuring Sika Starban. Now Sika is a good friend of mine who is a hip hop artist and also a traditional healer who happens to be a lesbian that lives in Davidson, where my good friend Colin Mfazwe is from, and he's a transgender filmmaker. And Colin made this amazing film. It's a short film that is translated with subtitles, all in isiZulu, basically talking about Sika's life experience, but also it speaks about gender and sexuality and features a small music video of her song, I'm a LGBTI, which is amazing. So those kinds of things is things that we really want to encourage. Can you write poetry in your mother tongue about your sexuality? Is it something that can speak to, other forms of being that is more storytelling related and also speaks a little bit outside of this English barrier that we've got going on? So I would encourage that most definitely, right? And I just want to thank everybody here at UP&Out for inviting us. I have not met a more enthusiastic student group and I'm so impressed with the work that is being done here and to see this kind of diverse community get together, right? I'm super, super excited for what UP&Out is really doing on this campus, and I also wanted to just let you know that there will be an event on the 17th of May, which is the International Day Against Homophobia and Transphobia, or also known as IDAHOPIT, International Day Against Homophobia, Biophobia and Transphobia and Intersex Phobia. I did not say that in order, it's fine, but it will be held at the Javed Art Center, and this is close by for you, and you will get those details in the run-up to IDAHOPIT, right? But thank you so much for inviting us to come and partake in this really, really important conversation. You are all agents of change. And yeah, please do check out Gala's website if you're interested in the archive and if you're interested in some of the resources that you can download. And it's just simple, www.gala.co.za. Cool, thanks.
Thank you so much. I don't think I can add any more than that. Sibongile, I can you challenge the language. But yeah, no, thank you so much. And after these events, do look these people up. I mean, I'm a scholar, University of Life, I do have some things out there, but please, it's a great resource. The work they've done is amazing. You'll find different archives, their experiences, they're in quite reputable papers as well. They've been featured in really important resources. So please reach out, remember the names. And I guess from our side, we've got a lot of work to do. It was fun, we laughed, it was a cool, vibrant space to be in. But just remember that it's not just a case of, always happiness, right? There's the darker side that we're not trying to make that the reality of this beautiful space, but we're fighting bigger realities. and not just keeping it academic, not just keeping it, fun and games. So yeah, I think for me, inclusivity got a long way to go. And yeah, please join the 9-week entry-level training at the center. Pop in anytime, not now, obviously, during office hours. And yeah, thank you so much and have a great evening.
Thank you, everyone. Justice for Creative Science, speaking directly to that. Do check it out. You'll find a lot of information around that, specifically related to addressing hate crimes against the LGBTI community.
Thank you, everyone. If you want to buy a hot, now is the time. 2 runs. Okay, goodbye.